The market was crowded, filled with alien traders, humans, and various creatures from across the galaxy. In the midst of the hustle and bustle, a figure moved slowly, unnoticed by most, her footsteps heavy and uncertain. She was unlike anyone else in the market, a strange, frail being with pale, cracked skin. Her once vibrant features were now dull and tired, and her eyes, once full of life, had faded into hopelessness. She was the last of her kind, a slave, discarded and forgotten. The memories of her home, her people, and her life before the chains seemed like a distant dream. A far-off memory she no longer cared to recall. She had been sold over and over again, never treated as more than an object, never allowed to rest. And now here she was, wandering through this strange alien world, starving and alone, with no purpose, no family, and no future. Her name was Zara, but it didn't matter anymore. Names didn't carry meaning when you were nothing but a tool, a thing for others to use and throw away. Zara was no more than a shadow in the crowd, hidden beneath the filthy rags that barely covered her thin frame. She could feel the stares, the whispers, the looks of disgust from those who passed by. She was used to it, even if it still hurt. They all saw the alien, the outcast, the slave. As she moved through the market, she could feel her body growing weaker. Her stomach had been empty for days, her throat dry and cracked from the lack of water. Her hands trembled as they clutched the small sign hanging around her neck, a tattered piece of cloth that read, "Last of my kind, starving, homeless." It was the only way she could ask for help, though she knew no one would listen. No one cared. Zara had learned long ago that the world didn't care about the weak. It didn't care about the broken or the discarded. It was a place where only the strong survived, and she was not strong anymore. The thought of being a slave again, of being used and beaten, made her shudder. But what else was there for her? She paused in front of a food stall, her empty stomach aching with hunger as she stared longingly at the fresh fruits and bread on display. She had no money, no way to pay. The stall owner, a large creature with multiple arms, glanced at her for a moment before turning away, his eyes narrowing in disgust. Zara sighed, feeling the familiar sting of rejection. She had been here for hours, hoping for something, anything to change, but nothing ever did. As she moved past the stall, Zara caught sight of something, or rather, someone, that made her pause. He was standing off to the side, just out of the main flow of the market. A human. He was tall and well-dressed, his clothes simple but clean, a sharp contrast to the dirt and grime that clung to Zara's body. His eyes were fixed on her, not with disdain or judgment, but with something else, curiosity, maybe even pity. For a brief moment their eyes locked, and Zara felt a strange flicker of something deep within her. Why was he looking at her? What did he see that no one else did? The human took a step forward, his gaze never leaving her. Zara quickly turned away, not wanting to be the subject of any more attention. But the man was persistent. He came closer, his footsteps soft against the stone ground. Zara quickened her pace, trying to lose him in the crowd, but he followed her, weaving through the people until he was right behind her. "Hey," he called out gently, his voice quiet but firm. Zara froze. She didn't want to stop, didn't want to face him. She had been ignored for so long, treated like an animal, that she didn't know how to react to someone speaking to her with kindness. She had forgotten what that felt like. But the human's voice was different. There was no mocking tone, no condescension. There was just sincerity. "Are you okay?" he asked. Zara didn't respond at first. She wanted to tell him to leave her alone, to go back to his world, but something in his eyes made her hesitate. No one had ever asked her that question before, not in the way he had. No one had ever cared. She turned slowly to face him, her eyes wary, her heart pounding in her chest. The man was still standing there, waiting for her to speak, his expression soft but sincere. "Do you need help?" he asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. What could she say? Could she trust him? Was this another trick, another way for someone to use her? Or was this somehow her chance for something different? She closed her eyes for a moment, taking in a shaky breath. The world had never been kind to her, but maybe, just maybe, this time it could be different. With a small nod, she finally spoke, her voice hoarse and broken. I need help," she whispered. The human smiled gently, as if her words had brought him relief. "You're not alone," he said, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Zara believed him. Zara's heart raced as she slowly turned to face the human. She was used to rejection, used to being ignored, so the unexpected kindness felt almost foreign. Her skin crawled with nerves as the man stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers, studying her with an intensity that felt different from the usual glances she received. She had seen humans before, of course. Most of them kept to themselves, too busy with their own lives to care about the suffering of someone like her. They were the powerful ones in this universe, the ones who controlled trade, politics, and technology. Alien slaves like Zara were mere objects, tools for work or entertainment, never seen as equals. That was the way the world worked. But now here was a human who seemed different. His expression was soft, not filled with the usual disgust or fear. He wasn't repulsed by her filthy appearance or the stench of despair that clung to her. "Are you okay?" he repeated, his voice still gentle but insistent. Zara hesitated, glancing around the market. She had been in this situation before, lonely and abandoned, hoping someone would notice her. The few times that it happened, it had always ended in disappointment or worse. Most humans saw her as little more than an exotic curiosity. Some even mocked her, but this man, he was different. "I'm fine," Zara muttered, barely above a whisper. She wanted to keep walking, wanted to disappear into the crowd where she could hide her shame. But something deep within her, something buried under layers of fear and pain, told her that this time, running wasn't the answer. The human, undeterred by her attempt to dismiss him, took another step closer. "I don't believe you," he said with a small reassuring smile. "You don't look fine." Zara's hands trembled as she clenched them at her sides. She wanted to scream, to tell him to leave her alone, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, not with pity, but with genuine concern. She had never been treated with this kind of respect before. Every other human she had encountered had seen her as nothing more than a tool or a piece of dirt. But this man was seeing something else, something deeper. "Why do you care?" Zara found herself asking before she could stop herself. The man's smile faltered slightly, as if the question caught him off guard. But he quickly recovered, his gaze unwavering. "Because everyone deserves a chance," he replied softly. "And you don't look like you've had one in a long time." Zara's chest tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not in all her years of suffering and pain. No one had ever looked at her and seen potential, seen something worth saving. She didn't know how to respond to that. It felt foreign. She didn't even know what hope felt like anymore. I'm not someone you can help," Zara said, her voice cracking. She looked down, ashamed. "I've been sold, used, abandoned. No one cares about me." "Maybe not where you've been," the man said, his tone firm yet compassionate. "But I care. And I'm not asking for anything in return. I just want to help." Zara's mind raced and she felt a tear slip down her cheek before she could wipe it away. Could she trust him? She had been hurt so many times before. People had promised to help her, only to turn their backs when she was no longer useful. What if this was just another trick? What if he too was just trying to get something from her? But something in his eyes, a sincerity she hadn't seen in years, made her pause. Maybe this time it could be different. I don't know if I can trust you," Zara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been alone for so long. I don't know how to trust anyone anymore." The human nodded, his expression understanding. "I get it. Trust takes time. I won't force anything on you. I'll just be here if you need help. But I'm not going to let you suffer. Not while I can do something about it." Zara looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of deception, but all she saw was a calm determination, a kindness that seemed too good to be true. She swallowed hard, feeling her heart race with a mix of fear and hope. What if he was different? What if this was her chance for something better? I could use some help," she finally said, her voice barely audible. The man's eyes softened and he took another step forward. "Let me help you. I can get you some food, some water, a place to stay even, whatever you need." Zara felt her knees go weak at the mention of food. The hunger inside her had been gnawing at her for so long that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to be full. She had always known that food was a luxury, something reserved for the powerful, for those who had control. But now here was a man offering it to her without hesitation, without asking for anything in return. I don't know what to say," she murmured. "Then don't say anything," he replied. "Let me show you." For the first time in years, Zara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. A small flicker, but enough to make her believe that maybe, just maybe, her life could be different. And so, with a hesitant step forward, Zara allowed the human to guide her away from the market, away from the life she had known and into something uncertain, but it was better than nothing. It was a chance she couldn't refuse. As they walked together into the unknown, Zara didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. Zara followed the man through the narrow alleys, the sounds of the market fading into the distance. The further they walked, the more distant the world she knew seemed to become. She was acutely aware of every step she took, every movement, every breath. She had spent so many years on her own, trusting no one, that this sudden change felt almost surreal. She kept her eyes on the ground, afraid that if she looked up, the illusion would shatter. The man, whose name she still didn't know, moved with quiet confidence. His steps were steady, his pace neither too fast nor too slow, as if he didn't mind whether she was walking with him or trailing behind. He wasn't rushing her, but he wasn't giving her the chance to second-guess herself either. He was guiding her, gently but firmly, out of the maze of streets and into an unfamiliar part of the city. Eventually, they arrived at a small, modest building, one that stood out among the larger, more grandiose structures around it. It wasn't much to look at, with its worn bricks and unpolished windows, but there was something inviting about it. It wasn't the type of place where people like Zara usually found refuge, but something told her this was different. The man opened the door and gestured for her to step inside. "Come on in," he said, his voice soft yet reassuring. Zara hesitated, for a moment. Standing on the threshold, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to trust him, she did. But years of being betrayed, of being used and discarded, had made her wary of anything that seemed too good to be true. She had learned to be suspicious of gestures like this. She had seen people offer help only to pull it away once they had what they wanted. But as she stood there, her body aching from hunger, exhaustion, and the weight of a life spent in misery, she felt something shift within her. Maybe it was the exhaustion that had clouded her judgment, or maybe it was the kindness in his eyes. But for the first time in what felt like forever, Zara allowed herself to believe in something different. She stepped inside. The room was simple but warm. A small table stood in the center, surrounded by mismatched chairs. The walls were decorated with faded paintings, and the soft glow of a few hanging lights gave the place a homely feel. The scent of fresh food wafted through the air, making Zara's stomach growl in response. It had been so long since she had eaten anything beyond scraps, and the thought of a proper meal felt almost impossible. The man closed the door behind her and gestured toward the table. "Please take a seat," he said. "I've got some food ready. It's not much, but it should fill you up." Zara's eyes flickered toward the table. Her mouth was dry, and she could feel the weight of hunger pressing down on her like a stone. She wanted to run toward the food, to devour it as quickly as possible, but something inside her held her back. This wasn't just food, it was an offer, a gesture of kindness, and she wasn't sure how to handle it. She sat down slowly, her body shaking slightly, unsure of what to do next. The man placed a bowl of steaming soup in front of her and pushed a glass of water toward her as well. "I know you're hungry," he said, his voice warm and steady. "But you don't have to eat all at once. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." Zara didn't know what to say. She stared at the food in front of her, her hands trembling as she reached for the spoon. The soup smelled incredible, rich and savory, something she hadn't tasted in years. It was more than just nourishment. It was the first true act of kindness she had experienced in so long that she almost couldn't comprehend it. She hesitated for only a moment before lifting the spoon to her lips. The taste was like nothing she had ever experienced. The warmth filled her, not just in her body, but in her soul. For a fleeting moment, it felt as if the world outside didn't matter. She wasn't an alien slave. She wasn't discarded or forgotten. She was just a person, sitting at a table with a kind man who saw her as more than an object. As Zara ate, the man remained quiet, his gaze soft but watchful. He didn't rush her. He didn't push for her to speak. It was as if he understood. That sometimes the most important thing was simply to be present, to offer comfort without expecting anything in return. When Zara finished the soup, she sat back in the chair, feeling the warmth spread through her body finally able to relax for the first time in ages. She had eaten in silence, too overwhelmed to speak. But now her mind began to clear and the thoughts that had been clouding her senses slowly began to settle. She looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice still shaky. "I don't understand. I've never met anyone who would do this for me." The man smiled, but it was a small, almost sad smile. "You're not the only one who's been hurt," he said quietly. "I've seen a lot in my life, a lot of injustice, a lot of pain. But I've also seen that the smallest act of kindness can make all the difference. I'm helping you because you deserve better than what life has given you. Everyone deserves a chance. Even you." Zara's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever seen her as more than a slave, an object. To hear someone say that she deserved better, well, it almost broke her. She had never allowed herself to believe she deserved anything, least of all kindness. But here, with this man, she was beginning to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she could have something more. "Thank you," she whispered, barely able to form the words. She didn't know what else to say. She didn't know what was next. But for the first time, Zara felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough, and maybe for once that would be enough to change everything. The next few days passed in a blur for Zara. Each morning she woke to the warmth of the small apartment, a bed that cradled her tired body, and the lingering smell of food cooking in the kitchen. It was nothing like the cold, dark cells she had once been kept in, where she had woken to the sound of metal chains rattling, a far cry from the silence that enveloped her now. But it wasn't just the physical comforts that had begun to change. It was the quiet, subtle shifts within herself, ones she didn't fully understand, but that felt undeniable. Every meal she ate filled her with more than just sustenance. It was nourishment for her soul, a salve to the wounds she had carried for so long. She no longer had to scrounge for scraps or beg for leftovers. Each meal, each kind gesture, was like a thread in the fabric of her healing, slowly stitching her back together. Zara had never known what it felt like to be cared for. She had been trained to obey, to serve, to be silent. The years of brutal servitude had worn away any semblance of self-worth she once had. But here, in this modest apartment, she was starting to feel something different. She was beginning to feel like she had value again. For the first time in years, Zara looked at herself and saw more than just a slave. She saw a person, a woman, someone capable of being more than just a tool. The man, whose name was Alex, never pushed her to do anything she wasn't ready for. He kept his distance, giving her space to heal, yet he was always there when she needed him. He was patient, understanding, never once questioning her silence or her hesitation. He simply let her be, offering support in the quietest, most profound ways. Each day, Zara found herself growing stronger, both physically and emotionally. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it did happen, slowly, like the gentle unfolding of a flower that had been closed for far too long. As the days passed, Zara's once dull eyes regained a spark. Her shoulders, which had once sagged with the weight of years of suffering, began to straighten. She started to walk with more purpose, more grace, as if her very spirit was learning to stand tall again. One evening, after another quiet meal, Zara stood by the window, gazing out at the city below. The streets were crowded as usual, with traders haggling over goods, families walking home after a day's work, and children playing in the streets. The scene was familiar, but for the first time, it didn't make her feel small or insignificant. She realized that for the first time in her life, she felt like she was part of the world. She wasn't invisible anymore. Alex walked up behind her, standing quietly beside her without saying a word. He had always given her space when she needed it, but he never shied away from being there when she opened up. She had started to talk to him more over the past few days about her past, her struggles, the things she had endured, but it was still hard. Her voice often trembled as she spoke of the horrors she had lived through, the pain she had buried deep within her. But she wasn't trembling now. This time, when she turned to face him, her gaze was steady. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but firm, like someone who had finally found her footing in a world that had always been unkind. "I think I'm ready," she said quietly. Alex looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly. "Ready for what?" "To leave," Zara said, her heart beating a little faster. "To leave this place, to go out there in the world. I don't want to hide anymore." Alex's eyes softened and a small smile tugged at his lips. "Are you sure? It's okay if you need more time. No one's rushing you." Zara shook her head. "I've had enough time, Alex. I've been running from the world for too long. I can't do that anymore." He nodded, respect in his eyes. "All right then. I'll help you. Wherever you want to go, we'll go together." The words felt strange, but they were real. Zara didn't know where she would go or what would happen next. But she knew that for the first time in her life, she had a choice. A choice to do something for herself. To live for herself. In the days that followed, Zara began to venture out into the city more. At first, she felt nervous, hesitant, like an outsider in a world that had always been unkind to her. But Alex was always by her side, a silent strength she could rely on. The more they explored, the more Zara felt herself coming alive. She visited places she had once only heard of, quiet parks where children played, markets where people traded goods without looking down on her, and even a library where she sat in awe of the endless books on the shelves. It was in these moments, as she walked through the city with Alex, that Zara began to realize how much she had changed. The world wasn't as dark as she had once thought, and there were places and people in it that could still be kind. She wasn't the broken alien slave anymore. She wasn't a thing to be discarded. One afternoon, after a particularly long walk through the city, Zara found herself sitting on a bench in a small park. The sun was low in the sky, casting a warm golden light across the space. Alex sat beside her, quietly watching her as she stared ahead, lost in thought. "I never thought I'd be here," Zara said, her voice almost a whisper. "I thought I was doomed to be alone, to be nothing, but now I feel like I have a future." Alex turned to her, his gaze kind and unwavering. "You do, and I'm here to help you build it one step at a time." Zara smiled, a real smile, the kind she hadn't shown in years. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. She was no longer just surviving. She was living. And for the first time, Zara realized that maybe, just maybe, she could have a future, one of her own making. The city was alive with the sound of distant chatter, the rhythm of daily life pulsing through the streets as the sun began its descent behind the buildings. The air had cooled, and Zara felt a fresh breeze on her face, carrying with it the scents of blooming flowers from a nearby garden. For the first time, she wasn't focused on the crowded market or the dull ache in her stomach. She was present in the moment, breathing in the world around her as if she could finally see it for what it was. A place where, for once, she had a right to be. Zara and Alex had walked for hours, slowly making their way through the unfamiliar parts of the city. Every new corner, every unfamiliar face seemed less daunting now. With Alex by her side, she no longer felt like an outcast, a nameless thing lost in a world that didn't care. As they reached the edge of the park, Alex stopped, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "Want to sit for a while?" he asked, his voice soft, as if sensing her need for a moment of peace. Zara nodded, her eyes searching the park. It was quiet here, far from the bustling streets and crowded market. She had spent so many years avoiding peaceful spaces, feeling unworthy of the serenity they offered, but now, as she looked around at the calm beauty of the park, she felt at home. They found a secluded bench beneath a large, spreading tree. Zara sat down first, her back pressing against the cool wood as she looked up at the leaves swaying gently in the evening breeze. Alex sat next to her, but they didn't speak right away. Instead, they simply sat there side by side, taking in the peacefulness of the moment. For Zara, this silence was different from the kind she had known before. It wasn't oppressive. It didn't feel heavy with judgment or loneliness. This silence was filled with something new, something unexpected, a connection. Alex had been kind to her since the day they met. But as the days passed, Zara had begun to realize that what they shared was more than just an act of charity. She could see the way Alex looked at her, not as a broken soul to be pitied, but as someone worthy of respect and maybe something more. He never asked for anything in return for his help, yet he gave her everything: his time, his patience, his trust. And in return, Zara found herself offering something she had long ago shut away: trust. She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you doing this? You've given me so much, but I don't understand why." Alex looked at her, his expression soft yet filled with an understanding that seemed to transcend words. "Because I believe in people," he said simply. "I believe in the good in people even when it's hard to see. I saw something in you the moment I laid eyes on you, Zara. Something worth saving, something worth protecting. You're not just an alien or a slave or a thing to be discarded. You're a person. Someone with dreams, with a past, and with a future. And I want to help you find that future." Zara felt her breath catch in her throat. His words were like a balm to the deep, scarred wounds in her heart. It was something she had never heard before, and it made her feel both vulnerable and alive in ways she hadn't experienced in years. "How can you be so sure?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Alex smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Because I know what it's like to feel lost, to feel like you're nothing. But I also know that change is possible. You don't have to be defined by your past. We all have a chance to start over." Zara looked down at her hands, the same hands that had once been bound in chains, the same hands that had been used to serve others, to endure pain. She had never imagined that one day she would be sitting here, free of those chains, with someone who genuinely cared for her, not because of what she could do, but because of who she was. "I don't know if I can believe in that," Zara said, her voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can ever be more than what I've been, than what I've done." "You already are more," Alex said, his voice firm but gentle. "You're more than the things that have happened to you. You're not your past, Zara. You're not the mistakes or the hurts. You're a person just like anyone else, and you deserve a chance to live for yourself." For a long moment, Zara said nothing. His words echoed in her mind, slowly unraveling the knot of fear and doubt that had twisted itself around her heart for so long. Could it really be true? Could she really change? Could she truly live a life where she was no longer defined by the chains of her past? Zara looked up at the sky, the first stars beginning to appear as the evening deepened. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the weight of despair pressing down on her. There was something ahead of her now, something waiting, something worth fighting for. Alex's voice broke through her thoughts. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. You just have to take one step forward. I'll be with you every step of the way." Zara turned to look at him, meeting his gaze, and for the first time she didn't look away. There was something there, something between them, something strong and unspoken, a bond that had formed without either of them realizing it. It wasn't based on pity or charity. It wasn't a debt to be paid. It was simple, pure connection. And in that moment, Zara understood. "I don't know where this will lead," she said, her voice steady for the first time in a long while. "But I want to try. I want to see where it goes." Alex smiled again, and this time there was no doubt in his eyes. "Then we'll take it one day at a time." And so, they sat there together under the tree, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. It wasn't a grand promise, but it was enough. They didn't need to know everything. All that mattered was that they had each other in this moment, and that was enough to begin with. The weeks had passed quietly, each day blending into the next as Zara adjusted to a new life, one she could scarcely have imagined just a short time ago. The quiet comfort of her life with Alex had begun to feel like a dream, something fragile and delicate, something she didn't know how to protect. They had spent their days exploring the city, learning about one another, sharing stories and experiences from lives so different, yet so similar in their need for connection. Zara's body had healed, her strength slowly returning with each passing day. The scars of her past, both physical and emotional, were still there, but she was beginning to understand that they didn't have to define her anymore. The harsh memories of her time as a slave no longer controlled her thoughts as they once had. She could breathe easier now, though the weight of her history still lingered like an old wound that never fully healed. But it wasn't just the physical healing that had changed her. It was the way she was beginning to see herself. For the first time in years, she was learning what it meant to have worth, to have a place in the world. Alex had taught her that. He had shown her kindness and patience, asking for nothing in return but her trust. And as she had begun to trust him, she had also begun to trust herself. But now there was a decision looming on the horizon. Zara could feel it in the air, a quiet tension that hung between them. It had been building for days, unspoken but undeniable. There was a moment approaching, one that would require her to make a choice that could change everything. Zara sat at the small table in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, the steam rising in delicate tendrils. The room was quiet, save for the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Alex was out on the balcony watching the city below, lost in thought. Zara's mind, too, was consumed with thoughts, but they were heavy and difficult to grasp. She had always been told what to do, where to go, and who to be. Her entire life had been defined by the choices of others, by the whims of those who owned her, who controlled her. But now, for the first time, Zara was standing at a crossroads, free to make her own choice. The question was, what would she choose? She knew Alex had feelings for her. It was evident in the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't looking, in the way he was always there for her even when she didn't ask. He had given her everything, his time, his trust, his kindness, and never once had he pushed her to make any decision. Yet the bond between them had grown undeniably strong, and Zara could feel it too. It was a connection that had deepened in ways she didn't fully understand. But what did that connection mean? What was she supposed to do with it? Zara had never allowed herself to think about love, about companionship, about a future. She had spent so many years just trying to survive, just trying to make it through each day without falling apart. The idea of building a life, of being with someone, felt foreign to her. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. It was everything she had never allowed herself to want. And yet here she was with Alex standing at the edge of something new. The question lingered in her mind. Could she trust him enough to build a future together? Could she trust herself enough to take that leap? Alex had never pressured her, never asked for more than she was willing to give. He had always respected her boundaries, but Zara knew that a time would come when a decision had to be made. She couldn't stay in this quiet limbo forever, not when her heart was slowly, quietly opening to the possibility of something more. She had to decide whether she could allow herself to embrace the love Alex offered, or whether she would retreat into the safe, familiar isolation she had known for so long. The sound of the balcony door sliding open pulled Zara from her thoughts. She looked up to find Alex standing in the doorway, his gaze soft but questioning. He had sensed her shift in mood, the way her thoughts had become distant, withdrawn. "Zara?" His voice was gentle, filled with a quiet understanding. "What's going on in your mind? You've been distant lately." Zara took a deep breath, setting her teacup down gently on the table. She looked up at him, meeting his gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the moment she had been avoiding. She couldn't keep running from the truth. She had to face it. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, her voice shaking slightly, "about what comes next. About us." Alex's eyes softened and he stepped closer to her, but he didn't sit down. He respected the space between them, knowing she needed it. "What are you thinking?" "I don't know what to do," she confessed, her voice low, vulnerable. "I've spent my whole life being controlled by others, by my past. I've never had the chance to make a choice for myself. Not like this. I don't know how to move forward." Alex sat down across from her, his gaze unwavering. "Zara, you don't have to have everything figured out right now. You don't have to make a decision today or tomorrow. I'm not going anywhere. We'll take this one step at a time," but Zara knew that was a lie. She couldn't put this off forever. She had to decide if she was ready to take the next step, to open herself to something more than just survival. "I've never been able to trust anyone fully," she said, her voice cracking. "I've been hurt too many times. I don't know if I can trust you, trust myself." Alex reached across the table, his hand resting gently over hers. "I understand," he said softly, "but I'm here, and I'm not asking you to trust me right away. I'm asking you to trust yourself, to let yourself believe that you can have a future that's different from the past you've known. You don't have to be alone anymore, Zara. I'm not going anywhere." Zara felt a tear slip down her cheek. It wasn't sadness. It was the release of something she had been holding back for far too long. The fear, the doubt, the uncertainty. It was all flooding out, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel it, to be vulnerable. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered. Alex's smile was warm, understanding. "You don't have to be ready. Not yet, but you have the time. And you have me. That's all I can promise." And for the first time, Zara felt a glimmer of peace, as if, for once, she didn't have to make a decision alone. Maybe, just maybe, she could begin again. on her own terms with Alex by her side. The days following their conversation had been quiet, but filled with an unspoken tension. Zara's heart was still heavy with the weight of the decision she had to make, but the days of uncertainty were beginning to feel like a distant memory. As the days blended together, Zara had slowly allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was something more waiting for her beyond the scars of her past. Alex had been patient, never rushing her, never pushing her for anything. He had respected her need for time, for space to think, but he hadn't pulled away. He had stayed by her side as steady as the earth beneath her feet, offering her not just his presence but his trust. Now, sitting together in the warmth of the small apartment, Zara found herself at a crossroads once again. She had been lost in thought for hours, her mind constantly drawn to the conversation they had shared, to the words Alex had spoken. For the first time, Zara was forced to confront the reality that her life, the one she had been hiding from for so long, was not defined by the chains she had worn. It wasn't defined by the slums of the past or the pain that had followed her for years. It was something new, something fragile and yet full of promise. She didn't know if she was ready for it, but she knew she could never move forward unless she took the first step. She could feel her heart racing as she stood up, her hands trembling as they clasped together. The room seemed smaller now, as if the walls were closing in with the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Alex was sitting on the couch, reading a small book. He didn't look up at first, but Zara knew he was aware of her every move. He always had been. There was a quiet strength in his presence, something that made Zara feel safe even in moments of uncertainty. Finally, she took a deep breath and turned toward him, her voice shaking as she spoke. "Alex," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking a lot, about everything, about us, and about what you said about trusting myself. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, but I do know that I don't want to run anymore." Alex set the book down gently and looked at her, his gaze soft and filled with understanding. "Zara, you don't have to do anything you're not ready for. I'm not asking you to have it all figured out. I'm asking you to take a step forward, one step at a time." Zara stepped forward slowly, her legs feeling heavy as if she were moving through water. Every part of her wanted to turn away, to retreat into the safety of isolation, but she knew deep down that she couldn't keep running. "Not anymore, I'm scared," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I'm scared of trusting again, scared of what might happen if I let myself believe that I could be happy, that I could have a life." Alex stood up then, his eyes never leaving hers. Slowly he walked toward her, each step bringing him closer until he was standing just inches away. The air between them seemed to hum with energy, a quiet force that neither of them could ignore. "You don't have to be scared," he said, his voice low and reassuring. "I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. And I believe in you, Zara. I believe in the strength you have inside, the strength you don't even know you have yet." For a moment, Zara just stood there, her breath shallow, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never allowed herself to believe in anything so fully. She had always thought of herself as broken, as unworthy of love, of trust, of hope. But as she looked into Alex's eyes, she realized that perhaps she wasn't so broken after all. Maybe she was just waiting to be healed, waiting for someone to show her that there was more to life than survival. And that someone was here, standing before her, offering her not just his help but his heart. Her hands reached out on their own, trembling, and she placed them on his chest. Feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingertips, she felt the warmth of his body, the strength in his touch, and for the first time in years she felt safe. It was like a dam inside her had broken, and all the emotions she had buried for so long began to flow freely. Fear, hope, longing, and something deeper she couldn't name. She looked up at him, her voice barely audible but filled with resolve. "I want to try, Alex. I want to try to trust, to believe that I can have a future. With you." A smile spread across Alex's face, one so gentle and full of love that Zara felt her heart skip a beat. "You don't have to do anything alone anymore," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm here with you. Whatever you need, whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Zara's breath caught in her throat as she looked up at him, a rush of warmth flooding her chest. She had spent so many years locked away in her own fear, afraid to open her heart, afraid of what might happen if she allowed herself to feel something more. But now, in this moment, with Alex by her side, she could see a different future. "I don't know what the future holds," Zara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. But I know I want to be with you. I want to be yours. Alex's hands cupped her face, his touch gentle, as if he were afraid she might break if he held her too tightly. You already are, Zara, he said softly. You already are, and in that moment Zara knew. She knew that everything had changed. She wasn't the broken, abandoned alien anymore. She was someone who had been given a second chance. A chance to live and love, to choose her own path, and to build a future with someone who saw her as more than just a slave. With Alex by her side, Zara finally believed that maybe, just maybe, she could be whole again.